you check the children? Show a little mess
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego.
I'm Cecil Laird.
And if you please, you join us here for further special palaver on Hail to Stephen King. No eardrum blowing this time, I promise everybody. And this is the fourth portion of an idea that Cecil had, and he was obviously right, because the first episode, which we have already debuted, trended extremely well. The response was very positive, so that's why he's the showrunner and I'm just co-producer and on-camera talent. But yeah, man, this was a great idea. Response was really kick-ass, and I'm
glad everyone's liking it.
Stoked to further delve into the fourth decade.
Hopefully they're still liking it by this time.
Oh yeah, well, because there's probably a lot of divisive opinions that have already transpired in episodes 2 and 3, most notably. I still think that that drawing of the tree is probably where I'm going to get the most flack from a lot of people. But,
we were already seeing some people disagree with some stuff, but for the most part, they were just like, it's just off by like a level or two. So.
Personal opinions, man, you know.
Well, that's what's nice about the tier thing, again, because since you're not necessarily doing it each one versus each other, if you're just a level or two off, they seem to be okay with that.
Enough.
Yeah. They're like, okay, it's a little off for me, but I'll accept it. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, hopefully most of my opinions are pretty close to yours, but if not, hey, art is subjective, and that's the nice part about this sort of discussion, everybody. So we are now heading from 2004 onward, if I am not
This is 04 to 13, yes sir.
Exactly. And we are beginning with the further stretch run of Psy King, finishing out all of the Dark Tower books, which we basically last discussed at the end of our previous video with Book 5, Wolves of the Kala. So after King's injury, just to give a little further context, since I can't remember exactly how I put it in episode 3 of this tier ranking, after King's accident and health uncertainties and stuff like that, he had at one point said he was going to retire from writing after that dude ran him over, and just broken ribs and like leg and the knee problems, all this different stuff. He at one point said he was not going to write anymore. Then he did decide to return, and we had stuff like Dreamcatcher and Book 5, Wolves of the Kala, but he was like, I don't know how long I'm going to live. I don't want to, pass the baton necessarily to my son Joe, although there was apparently discussion at one particular point. So as opposed to spacing the Dark Tower books, he decided to just write the final 3 volumes all in succession, and that's why we call it the stretch run, lots of Tower junkies. And whereas I enjoyed most of Wolves of the Kala up until the very end, which is what actually has it sitting at the particular spot it is, I believe it's a B yes, correct. This is my least favorite Dark Tower book. It's one of the shortest Dark Tower books, and it feels very just transitionary preamble to the finale of the series in a lot of ways. And I also didn't like the splitting of our characters, and this is also where we get meta as all hell. You thought it was meta before. Stephen King himself shows up in this story. So yeah, Eddie and Roland actually have to go and find the actual Stephen King in the 70s when the inception of this story is really coming together, and they sit down and they talk with him, and then King even puts his actual accident into the story as well at the very end of this book. It's really weird, and it's not just those elements that make me dislike it. I also don't really like the stuff with Mia and Susanna in Discordia. Basically, Susanna's character, the lame black woman who has like no legs, and she's married to Eddie Dean and all this other stuff. You're not really familiar with these characters, I guess, but yeah, she ends up having like a demon that has possessed her and kind of steals control at particular points, and so she goes and has a palaver of sorts with this demon woman that has possessed her. That's a subplot I'm not super big on, and it is nice getting more Father Callahan, who returns in the previous book, Wolves of the Kala. Him and Jake actually go on their own little journey, and they're in New York City circa 1999, and they're trying to find the Dixie Pig, which is this like seedy bar where vampires and lots of Cantoy and different like minions of the Crimson King are all meeting, and they're gonna like just eat a person. But I mean, it's really it's not absolutely terrible, but it's got lots of strange ideas, and this is the only Dark Tower book I'm putting as a D, man, because yeah, it just I don't know, it has its apologists. There's some people who really dig it, but it's my least favorite of the books, and it just feels like a lot of setup. In some ways, I feel like this book could have taken some of the stuff that happened in book 7, and they could have not made book 7 so big and bloated and drag in the middle if they had given a little bit more of that story to book 6. So yeah, everybody, I know it is a fairly common opinion that this is not one of the favorites for a lot of Tower junkies and constant readers. So
might be an agreement there.
Yeah, so there you go. And then we come to the grand finale. And the grand finale, the Dark Tower VII, the Dark Tower, the end of the stretch run, although King did return to the property a little bit later in this decade with 4.5, which we will get to later, which is the Win Through the Keyhole. But Dark Tower VII was, for me, a disappointing ending to this amazing epic journey. We do get to find out the full extent of those breakers, you know, those psychic people who are actually trying to destroy the beams that hold the tower in place. That is, like, you know, just the center of the entire, like, all universes, essentially. We do get to meet Sheeny again, who has been taken and is being used as a breaker. We also get Brodigan from Hearts in Atlantis. He is another person. That was the reason the
Anthony
Low Men...
Hopkins?
Yep, the reason the Low Men were after him is because of his abilities, and they wanted to use him as somebody to help work, you know, in this area and stuff. And so, yeah, it's there's a lot that happens. There is there's basically a freeing of all of those breakers, and there's an epic battle. But our characters finally start to get picked off one by one, and yeah, you lose pretty much everybody except for Susanna and Roland, and they basically are trudging through Endworld at that particular point, and they're trying to get to the actual tower, and it just really, really drags, especially in the middle of this book. But the biggest disappointment for me is when we finally get the full reveal of the Crimson King, and he's this goofy, maniacal, giddily, like, just spouting off gibberish and throwing, like, these grenades at Roland as he's just approaching the tower. And yeah, for just the build-up for the most epic villain of all, it's really disappointing. And also, Randall Flagg gets killed in this in a very lackluster fashion, and for being the king villain who has appeared in more stories than any, to have this little, like, half human, half spider kid, like, just eat him, it's lame, man. King made he rushed this, in my opinion. He didn't let the books sit and breathe like with all the previous entries, and so just storming through these in the fashion in which that he did, I feel like, you know, a lot of half-baked ideas. And this would probably be a D if not for the fact that when you finally get to the end of the book, and there's two endings to the book. There's, like, the ending, and then there's, like, the post-credits, basically. And the post-credits are actually rather satisfying for me, and that's actually what puts this up to a C instead of a D, because we basically, the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, and yes, the book ends basically where the series started without being super, super spoilery, and that was actually a really nice touch, and that's what saves this from being in the D ranking, everybody. But yeah, I mean, it's C. It's good at times, it's satisfying at times, but for me, there's more disappointment than that true gratification of the end of a journey, and so that's why it's sitting at the C's, everybody. I mean, this is a series, in my estimation, that peaked in the middle of our story, which is kind of a bummer to say. So if you love the ending of the Dark Tower, props to you, you know. But yeah, otherwise, that is at least my opinion about the ending of the
beloved series,
most epic thing King has ever done. So
next up is the basis for the TV show Haven.
Exactly, which lasted like 5 seasons, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Might have been 6, but
yeah. And I never watched Haven, and yet it is one, as I believe it's about to...
Gonna have to now.
Yep, exactly, yeah, because we're going to be doing a ranking of the television series. We're also going to be doing a ranking of the theatrical films and the mini-series / event series and stuff. So, but yeah, this lasted a number of seasons, and it's a very short little book. It's basically these two older detective guys talking with this younger girl who is new to the scene about a strange case about a John Doe that was found on shore, and yet there's all kinds of different clues as to what could have potentially happened to him. and it's a procedural. This was basically the beginning of King really embracing his love of the hard crime, and it's not with his regular publisher. This is with Hard Case Crime is the imprint. Now these guys also did the Joyland story as far as publishers for him go. So it's a very short read. I think it's less than 200 pages, and it's just a small little paperback, but they really expanded significantly from what people have told me about Haven. I think the 5-year or the 10-year anniversary for Haven is approaching. I believe it's 10 years at this particular point. So definitely planning a review of this. We actually talked with Marsha Parker about the three of us doing a review of that show. Maybe like
I ain't
just,
rewatching it. I'll finish it.
Yeah, because
no, I mean it's 5 seasons worth of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
yeah, maybe just overall impressions.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the show
I can do that. Yeah,
something.
I can do that.
Yeah, I had thought about tackling it season by season, but it will be discussed at some point. I've heard good stuff about the series, but it delves more into like a weekly X-Files kind of thing from what people have told me.
Yep.
This is a very simple story though. It's a C. It's a C for me in the fact that it's well written, it's fun, and I especially enjoy the banter. Amongst these like the older, more seasoned, slightly grizzled guys that we have in the story. As a whole, it's nothing that blew me away. It was a very fun little detour though, and so that is where the Colorado Kid stands.
All right, and the thumbnail's sake of this episode.
People are going to be very surprised at how high I put this one. Cell is an A for me.
Wow.
Cell is an A for me. Cell and there's a few without spoiling. Like Cell, really. It was King's homage to George Romero. He even gives a dedication to him at the very beginning of the book. Like, he dedicated this book to George. And at least for me, it was very different in comparison than anything King had done up to this point. It's kind of his version of a zombie story, but it's really not so much zombies as it's more like the crazies, if you've seen either the original or the remake of that. And it's essentially if everybody who was actually talking on their cell phone at the time, so not like diddling with it, but if you're actually on your cell at the time, there is a pulse that goes out across the entire world and basically turns everybody into like these rage zombies of sorts. So they're not like hungry for flesh, and it's not something that can be passed on to other people, but yeah, everybody who was in that particular state at the time, they are like they're sitting ducks to anyone who was actually turned at that particular time. So we have this comic book artist who was in Boston at the time, and he was trying to land this new gig. He ends up getting it, but it's a success that is short-lived because of the fact that everything happens right as he gets the job, and he ends up meeting up with I guess a middle-aged gay man, who is played by Samuel L. Jackson in the feature film. John Cusack portrays our lead character in the adaptation, which King actually scripted the adaptation. Did you ever see Cell, the film adaptation?
Yeah, we reviewed it.
Well, I thought we did. I was disappointed with some of the alterations that King decided to make for the script in comparison with the actual book itself, but there's just so many fascinating ideas for me in this. The fact that it's so distinctively different than a lot of things that King had done. Yes, it is another like doomsday apocalyptic sort of thing, but it took so many different approaches to the hive mentality and just the comparisons with like flocks of birds. And I especially like when they encounter the professor halfway through the book and they're hiding on the college campus, and it was one of the few scenes that in the film they actually accomplished very well in my estimation, which was where they saw all of them sleeping on the football field and they're burning all of them as their means of escape. And this also has one of the most heartbreaking deaths in my estimation of anything King related, and the fact that it doesn't even have anything to do with the people who have all been changed. It's almost like kind of Walking Dead in that degree, in the fact that eventually people become the villains more so than these actual monsters that surround us, and just the heartlessness of humanity in these sort of scenarios. And so yes, the film disappointed me, unfortunately, but I think the book is stellar and it is supremely underrated, and it's always a bummer to me when I see so many copies of this at the thrift stores and I don't know, resale stores and stuff like that, because they don't feel like it gets the proper appreciation. I put this one up there with like the best of the decade. It's definitely not an S. I mean, it's probably like A- at the end of the day, because then Salem's lots better, Talisman is better, Misery is better, Wastelands is better, but it's one of the best things in my opinion that he's done in the new millennium. So that is Cell, everybody.
Next up is Lisey's story.
Yes, Lisey's story.
Lisey's story.
Yeah.
Oh, is that how it's spelled?
Well, that's the thing. I didn't even think that it. I always said Lisey or Lizzie or whatever, but then King actually, or excuse me, not King. When the narrator was reading this and pronouncing it as Lisey, I was like, well, I guess it's Lisey then. So, but yeah, so this actually is King's favorite book that he has ever written. He's gone on record countless times to say that. They're actually developing this currently. They were filming right up into when quarantine started for Apple Plus. It's a television series. It's going to be starring Julianne Moore in the lead role. I believe Dane DeHaan is in this. Clive Owen, if I'm not mistaken.
Show or movie, did you say?
It's a TV show that's going to be on Apple Plus. 10 episodes, if I'm not mistaken. King scripting, though. And as I just mentioned with Cell...
Every episode?
Every episode.
Wow.
Yeah, he scripted the whole series. He was on set and everything. So, and that just also shows his affinity for this particular story. I guess you would think if it's his favorite book that he's ever written, as he continually has said over the last 15 years or so, yeah, this is one that he wanted just that care and that attention. He wanted to make sure someone didn't mess it up, but then again, sometimes King messes up his own stories, so who the heck knows, right?
Maximum overdrive.
Anyway. But yeah, this is very bittersweet, and so I can understand why he has such I don't know, why this one holds a special place in his heart. And it's because it's about a woman whose famous writer husband passes away, and she has to basically go and pick up the pieces. And she's going and she's like cleaning out his office, and it's lots of flashbacks to back when they were first married, and she starts to discover that to gain his creativity, her husband goes to this special place, and he's really like, he's like a dimensional jumper, basically. So he has this this alternate world that he goes to, and he kind of reveals some of it to her. And but you know, he doesn't really fully pull the curtain back, and so it's really more so than anything a really sweet love story between the two of them. Unfortunately, the reason this falls into the C tier for me is because it gets a little too tropey, especially in the third act, because once again, very similar to Misery, we're dealing with an obsessive fan, and that really it becomes very just kind of by the books in the back half, but because this obsessive fan goes after Lisey, and it turns into one of those typical, you know, cat and mouse held hostage sort of situations, which and Dane DeHaan is actually playing the villain, and I think he is great in a villain role, and Chronicle, and you know, various other things. He was one of the few good parts, in my opinion, about those two amazing movies. I liked him as Harry Osborn. I thought he was good, and so yeah, this one falls a little bit lower. It would probably be a B, but the third act really, it just kind of falls off the rails in my opinion, and just gets a little too familiar, and so that's why it falls to the C tier. But I do really like this book, and it's one that I plan to reread as we approach the release of the Apple Plus series, and I'm still really curious, you know, because I've heard great things about Servant. I've heard really good things about this new Chris Evans courtroom drama that's on Apple Plus, that also has the kid who played Big Bill.
Jacob's story or whatever?
Yeah. Something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
So yes, Lisey's story it's a very solid one. If not for the third act, it would have been a B, but yes, it falls to a C. Cool. In that regard.
So next up is Blaze.
Yes, indeed. At least as of this filming, the final Bachman book that we have seen published, and yet this was one that was actually another drawer book, very similar to Pet Sematary, although it sat around way longer and was never finished. King actually went back and significantly rewrote it, but this is not that good of a book, man. I mean, it is what it is. It's essentially about a slightly mentally handicapped, so we're not talking like full on. We're talking just like significant learning disability and like a little slow, I guess. You know, almost like a Tom Cullen type maybe is the best way that I can describe him. And so this main character gets involved in, he's kind of a petty criminal of sorts, but this smaller, like kind of Napoleon type dude that he hooks up with, and who starts manipulating him and using him almost like as muscle, as a partner in their crime endeavors. They kidnap this baby, and then little dude ends up dying, and his ghost is appearing to our lead character, and he's tasked with trying to care for this baby himself, despite being slow and yet still being haunted at the same time, and still manipulated to a degree by the spirit, the apparition of this dude who he was going around doing nefarious shizzle with. It's just, this is one where you can kind of see why it was in the drawer for as long, because it's not that good, man. And It's one that I haven't revisited, unfortunately, since the initial reading, which at this point was like 5 or 6 years ago, since this, this was the last like 15 or so years of King's publishing. But yeah, Blaze is it's right behind Rage, as being my least favorite Bachman book. It's like neck and neck between those two. So this is going to sit in the same grade level as Rage. This is going to be another D for us here. It's one of the few Stephen King properties that I don't think they've ever tried to adapt it, but and it also doesn't really have the same sort of spitefulness that you have in a lot of Bachman writing. It felt just more so like your standard King fare in a lot of ways, so it's definitely not memorable in any way. It might be my least favorite of this decade, because I mean, Dark Tower VI, even if it's still a Tower book, and it's still characters that I love, there is really nothing majorly memorable about Blaze, regrettably. So if you think differently, if you think it should be like a C or God forbid a B, hey, that is definitely your call, and I respect it if that is the case. So
next up,
now we get to one of the best of the decade. Yeah, this along with Cell,
Duma Key,
and one that unfortunately we still haven't seen an adaptation for, and I have been clamoring about this one for a long while, ever since reading it. This is one of the bigger boys, man. This is one that I think it's...
You talk about it a lot.
Yeah, it's close to 700, if I'm not mistaken. I know it's in the 6-ish range, for real, but... so, one of the few stories not to be set in Maine or, any of that surrounding New England area. This is actually down in Florida. And so, this is about a architect/construction dude who gets in a very nasty accident while on a job site, and he basically loses one of his arms, and it deals with that phantom limb syndrome of just thinking that that limb is still there and the weirdness of that. But after the accident, the guy is, first major rehabs and painkillers and just all of that adjustment causes major friction in his marriage. I can't remember if they separate or if they divorce, but he basically leaves. If I recall correctly, he's up in Minnesota initially, but he's like, okay, my marriage is pretty much over. I need a change of scenery, so he relocates down to Florida, which is where King spends half of his year. He's like divides it between Florida and between up in Maine, and so I think this is one of the few stories that he has actually set down there. I think The Gingerbread Girl is also set in Florida, but this being one of the only novels, this guy, after he gets down there, he starts to reconnect with this desire to be an artist and to paint and stuff. And he is just filled with inspiration and emotion, and he almost feels like there's an otherworldly presence that is fueling that. And he ends up becoming friends with one of my favorite Stephen King characters ever, like right behind Larry Underwood is this dude Wireman, who is very much he's a guy who married a Hispanic woman, and he's, kind of a Jerry Garcia, like, white dude of sorts, long hair, almost like the dude Jeff Bridges type. And if they ever made this into a movie, like, it'd have to be Jeff Bridges, man, or at least someone of that comparable ilk. I mean, maybe you could even go Bo Bridges, but nonetheless, well, one of those Bridgeses, man. But yeah, there is a ghost story that we end up slowly getting into, and it is another one of the stories where we have to go into the layer of, whatever this presence is, and which we've seen in It, which we saw in Insomnia, which we see later on in The Outsider. It's something that King has done quite a bit, is having to go into, the layer of the worm, or whatever the hell you want to say. But there is just, there's so much distinguished and different about this one, and the friendship between our two leads is so great. And I just like the fact that it was a different setting, and it really made some bold choices with, especially the death of one character in particular. It's up there for another one of the most heartbreaking in my estimation, especially based on reactions and stuff. And I like the artistic aspect of it as well. Like, the fact that our main guy, he, like, just the different paintings that he puts together, the art exhibition that he has, just him reinventing his life, it's a lot different than anything King has done. I want an adaptation so badly of this book. It is definitely an A for me. This is one that I wish Flanagan would tackle.
I thought you would have said S as often as you talk about it.
No, this is like, it's a solid A. Definitely solid A.
Fair enough. Don't let me sway you. I'm just saying, you talk about it a lot as one of your... It sounds to me like you talk about it a lot.
Oh yeah, well, it's because being a newer Book of Kings, and also one because I like to spread the word about it because so few have read it. It's never seen an adaptation. Adaptations always help with people going back and discovering the book a lot of ways, and I say in this program a lot that I like to watch a program if there is an adaptation, whether it's a TV series or a movie or whatever, before, and then go back to the book, because then I'm not disappointed about what's omitted, and in turn I almost get like an expanded version of the story, a director's cut of sorts. And I just hold the torch for Duma Key because we still haven't seen it adapted, so I'm just gonna keep beating that drum, man, until it happens. So
next up, also turned into a TV series.
Overstayed its welcome as a TV series, and the book did the same damn thing. Yeah,
it's another long one.
It's another very long one. This one does top 1,000 pages, if I recall correctly. Yeah, it's one of the door stoppers, man. And whereas the first season and a half of this show is pretty good, when they started really veering even more so from the storytelling within the book, that's when the show really lost its way. But that's the thing, even the book lost its way, in my opinion. I do like Barbie.
Show wasn't that great to begin with.
No, it wasn't. I mean, they were caught within the constraints of CBS and, just regular broadcast television. And while they did push the limits in a few instances, it would have done so much better on, a pay cable or even a streaming service of some sort. King actually went on Twitter recently in the last few months and said that he would like to see this readapted on a Netflix or a Prime or one of those outlets, because he feels like the show was not done, like the book was not done proper justice, which I was really surprised for him to just be that vocal about, since the show is not very old at this particular point. So yeah, for him to kind of throw Brian K. Vaughan, who was the one who adapted this, under the bus like that, I was kind of like, well, okay, man. But the book is very long and very plotting, and it's got it has a lot of subplots that I don't particularly like. I don't like the whole, cooking of meth and the drug ring that, that Big Jim and some of the people in the town had going. The crazy, radio host guy smoking meth and teaming up with the other guy who was like Big Jim's second or third in command, something like that. Well, first in command, he was like the second town selectman. That's the thing. There is a vast cast in this, so much so that if you get the deluxe edition of the book, which I have, which actually has like a gold foil wrap and stuff, it also has a little deck of playing cards, basically, that each of them corresponds with some of these main characters in this just vast cast of Chester Mill and all the people that reside there, because there are a lot of different peeps to take into consideration. I'm going to get a lot of flack about this one, because I know a lot of people here in Hail to Stephen King that really love this book. I do not love this book. This is one that, while it had a very intriguing premise, I feel like the execution was really lackluster, and it just drags and it goes in places that I'm not super fond of. And the fact that we have had so many better instances of the stir-crazy bunker mentality storytelling, stuff like The Mist, for instance, and this one just, it's a very bloated book, and a lot of this a good many of these vast cast of characters are not memorable, and it's a similar problem Sleeping Beauties falls into, where they're not as defined, distinguished, and you don't really, it doesn't have as much of an impact when some of these people die, because you didn't even have much of a chance to connect with them. So Needful Things also had issues with that too. This is like a C- D+, so I'm really kind of struggling, but guys, I think I have to put it at a D, because this art is subjective. I cannot
under the dome.
I cannot hit that enough, man. But yeah, this book just I don't like it very much. Well, although Big Jim is a very fascinating villain, I will actually say that I felt like they did him a little bit more justice with the dude from Breaking Bad on the television series, where they made him more of a shade of gray. Granted, he still had very evil aspects to him, but he felt more like a person as opposed to a one-note kind of caricature of villainy of sorts. So yeah, guys, D for the dome. Sorry, everybody, if you think it's I know some people would probably put this in.
No need to apologize for your opinion,
man. I just know a few people in particular in the Hail Facebook group that are going to be like, boo, they're going to be pissed. All right.
Next up is another one that was made into a limited series.
Yes, J.J. Abrams put together, a number of years ago at this point.
We already reviewed this, though. This is actually a review. This is on the channel.
2015, yeah, you, Marcia, and myself, with James Franco in the lead role. And actually, I thought Franco did a great job in this. This was a very good adaptation. The book is even better. And I think in the very first video, yep, it was the first video now that I think about it, that we covered the Dead Zone. This was King taking another stab, in my opinion, at writing the great American novel. Hearts in Atlantis was kind of in that accord because of the fact that that's another one that is just very reflective of American culture at a very pivotal point. This is a book King has wanted to write for a long time because he has actually made mention of traveling back in time to stop the Kennedy assassination in various books of his over the years, just in passing. You know, he would just make brief little mentions of it, characters discussing the idea, things of that nature. And it is a moral quandary that many others in various other aspects of pop culture and writing and film and television, it's a pretty common thread of discussion is, you know, what would the repercussions and the consequences be if you were to go back and kill not just Hitler, but, you know, somebody, just try to stop, you know, a really terrible thing from transpiring. What would could there be a butterfly effect of sorts to it? And this is 100% for me. Wow. This is one of the best things that King has ever written, in my opinion. It's not a horror novel by any means. It is very much just a captivating drama. Jake Epping is a great character. Just the love story, you know, between him and his lady, the cute little school teacher and stuff. I mean, you get a return to Derry, which you don't have in the television series. We actually get Bevy by the Levee and Richie, and a very just fun exchange between Jake and them, and they're like dancing around in the park, and it's super cute. And unlike in the television series where it's just one jump back, there's a lot more trial and error in the book, and some may think that was, you know, necessary fat to trim, you know, despite the fact that I think it was 10 episodes. It was either 8 or 10 for that limited series, but I
think it was 6 or 8. So no more than 8 for sure.
Really? I can't remember specific. I want to say 8 now that I think about it, but in any event, you've got the back and forth that is very, it just adds more of a, I don't know, realistic feel to the fact that, yeah, you probably wouldn't get it right the first time, and so, yeah, he spends many years there and then has to go back and then spend many years again on the second try and the third try and so on. And yeah, I actually do definitely like the book better in the regard that we don't have Jake the Foil, as I believe you, or excuse me, not Jake the Foil, Bill the Foil. That's right, Bill the Foil, yeah, because Jake Epping being the lead character and everything. But yeah, there's such a sweet love story here, and I love time travel storytelling. This is, I mean, this is one that I feel like when people look back at the non-horror history of Stephen King, you know, stuff like Stand By Me and, you know, Shawshank, this is right up there with those. And yeah, this book is terrific. Love 11/22/63. It's 100% a classic. And this is one that for people like of any walk of life could read this and find something engaging.
Next up is the final entry into Dark Tower, right?
At least for now, but yeah, so as opposed to being a sequel to, you know, 7 did finish the story, but King had an idea for a tale to tell that was in between books 4 and 5. So this takes place in between Wizard and Glass and the 5th book, Wolves of the Kala. So at the end of Wizard and Glass, they have basically left the Emerald, like the Emerald City castle of sorts, Emerald Palace, I guess is a better way to put it, where they encounter Grendel Flag, and it basically picks up right after that transpires with our new Ka-Tet. So Roland and Eddie Dean and Susanna and Jake and Oi, and they are just traveling down their proverbial yellow brick road, and they basically have to stop and hide out for the night because something called Stark Blast, if I remember, which is basically like a big like hurricane windstorm is coming through. So they have to hide out in this home and seek some refuge, and while they're there, Roland tells them another one of his stories about when he was a younger lad. So this is a story within a story, at least to start, and we flash back to young Roland, just like you had in those ports of Gunslinger Born and stuff. But this is him on a journey with Jaime DeCurry. And so that is a character that was mentioned in passing in the very first book, The Gunslinger, but they basically are sent on this mission to go and find out what is up with this. It's basically a shapeshifter of sorts that is taking the form of various animals and killing people in this town that is adjacent to where his mother actually went into hiding after all of the stuff with Martin Broadcloak went down, and her infidelity was brought to light and everything. And yeah, it goes from that story, and it's some of the most horror that the Dark Tower books actually turn into, because they very graphically describe what this creature has done to people in a barn in particular, and there is just body parts everywhere. People have been just torn to shreds and killed in all of these nasty fashions. And there's a kid at this particular barn that he's lost his father. His father has been torn to shreds and killed, and Roland decides to sit him down and try to calm him down, because this kid is significantly younger than our teenage Roland, and he tells him a story. And so it becomes a story within a story within a story, and that's that final story that we eventually get to, which makes up the crux of the center of the book, is about this kid whose father is mysteriously murdered, and he basically goes on this quest to assist his mother, and he has to trudge through this swamp, and he has to eventually try to find the wizard Merlin. And it's very interesting in the fact that there's mention of Delane, which is the kingdom where Eyes of the Dragon took place. This is where they solidify some of those connections. I just love any young Roland story. Absolutely adore them, even if it doesn't make up the predominance of this. Similar to book 4, which is my favorite Dark Tower book, I like the fact that we get the new Ka-Tet, we get a little bit with young Roland and his old Ka-Tet of friends, and even the story in the middle about this kid trying to save his mother. It's just very valiant stuff, and I love, and the reason I love the Talisman so much is because it's kids going on these sort of journeys and just epic adventures and stuff, and there is a presence of constant evil around. And I don't know, this is one that this was a return to form for Tower storytelling, in my opinion, man, and that's why I put it at an A. And the cover that you have there, that is not the actual hardcore cover. That is the limited edition hardcover that Grant put out, and that's where they actually brought on Joyland to do the cover illustrations and some black and white interiors. I've been wanting to purchase
what was on the Wikipedia, man.
Yeah, I know, because it was the way it was originally published. You still have the Grant covers for all of these, I think, and I think it is still in print.
Joyland is such a dope.
Yeah, it's just around $100, man, and that is a deluxe edition. I definitely have to getting around to purchasing once the flows of income start getting back to where they need to be. But yeah, I love The Wind Through the Keyhole. There's actually Mike's book reviews, I think. He's a dude who is new to the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, and he primarily covers stuff like Wheel of Time and all these different sci-fi series, but he's a big Stephen King fan, and he's done a few reviews on his channel as well. He said in a video of his, if I watched it, he's never read this book because he felt so burned by the ending of the Dark Tower. And this is one that if you felt burned by the ending of the Dark Tower, like I personally did as well, give The Wind Through the Keyhole a chance, because it's terrific. I love this book, man. Love this book. Not quite an S, but it's like maybe my third favorite Tower book. Third or fourth, at least. It's right up there. So.
Cool. Next up is Joyland.
Yeah. So Joyland is actually currently in development.
I don't know anything about this one.
Yeah, this is a coming-of-age story. It takes place in the 70s. It's also published by...
70s cover, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's also published by the Hard Case Crime, I believe, same imprint that did Colorado Kid for him. This is significantly superior to the Colorado Kid, in my opinion. This is a longer and more defined story, and coming of age, as I said. It's basically about this kid who is, he's in college, his first year, and he's in the process of, it's not going to work out with him and his girlfriend, him and his high school girlfriend. They have both gone on to separate schools, and he can just feel the division transpiring, and it's kind of heartbreaking for him. So it's either they're going to separate schools or at separate schools. Anyway, him and his girlfriend are breaking up. Okay, minor details. So as opposed to actually returning to school, he decides, well, I'm going to go and get a summer job, and he decides to take a semester off and not return and stay at that job at this amusement park called Joyland, which is, it's either North or South Carolina, I forget. He decides not to go back to school after the summer gig and just stay through into the fall, and it's very much like coming of age in the regard of, hey, if you're 19, 20 years old and you're experiencing heartache, and especially taking place in the early 70s, the kid is sitting around listening to dark side of the moon, and he's listening to his Doors records, and he's trying to make sense of just the maturing that he's going through, and heartbreak is definitely something that helps with that. But it's just a very sweet story, and the friendships that he forms with these two other kids who eventually become a couple, and he kind of makes a name for himself at this park, and he ends up saving a kid at one particular point, so he gets some recognition. And then, of course, it does kind of veer into some supernatural. There's kind of a haunted attraction at this particular place, but he ends up forging a friendship slash kind of romantic thing with an older woman, and she has this younger terminally ill son. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but it's still really very sweet, very simple. It's one that a lot of people aren't familiar with because there has not been an adaptation yet, although Freeform is working on adapting it into a television series right now. It's the kind where, since it takes place over a summer and then into the fall, and it spans like a period of time, they could easily just add a little bit of story here, add a little bit of story there. I don't know if you would want more than like a season or two necessarily. You could probably just do like a limited series, maybe 8-10 episodes, whatever. But they could expand. They could. I mean, it's in that sweet spot where they could really do a lot with this as far as expanding the storytelling, and it's one that just makes you feel sentimental, and it's one that more people actually need to discover. There's a great illustrated edition of it that they have where for the anniversary of it, I believe they put some new drawings and stuff that add some additional just peppers up the storytelling a little bit, having that visual aid and stuff. So yeah, Joyland is a B for me. It's a very, very solid story, and it's one that I wish more people would check out, and it does give you those vibes of It and Stand By Me, and just looking back at childhood, and except in this instance like childhood going into adulthood, and just that weird transitionary period where you're just trying to figure yourself out. That's what makes this book so great.
So incidentally, that's the only B from this episode so far.
Yeah, this was a little bit more divisive, I guess, and that was not even by design on my part. Then
it was on mine.
Ah.
So the last one is one that produced one of the best Stephen King movies, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially in recent years, but it's up there with some of the best adaptations ever, and that's because Mike Flanagan.
And of course, Dr. Sleep is what we're talking about for
exactly, yes, as you say it right. Yes, for podcasting purposes, we are talking Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining. A lot of people will be surprised if you're not familiar with my opinion on this. This is better than The Shining, in my opinion. It was fascinating to see the apple not falling far from the tree, and what happened to Danny Torrance in just his going into adulthood and just coming back to some of the same problems as his father. And it's like, try to run away from yourself and from your problems and stuff like that. But the problem is that you always take yourself with you, and so there's no turning away from that. That's just verbatim one of my favorite quotes that is in the book and pops up in the film as well. But yeah, the True Knot, fascinating villains. They are like psychic vampires of sorts. Rose the Hat, Crow Daddy, terrific villains. But in some ways, I felt like the film, believe it or not, improves on certain things, despite the fact that some stuff is omitted, some stuff had to be changed, because Dr. Sleep is a sequel to his original book. The Overlook was destroyed. It's now just campgrounds at the very end, and there's still residual evil there, and the True Knot is drawn there. But the film straddled the line very well in trying to appease fans of the book and fans of the original Shining film, and so yeah, this one is great. I love Abra's character. I really dig the connection with her and Danny that is formed, and it's a little bit longer in the tooth, obviously, so be ready for that. But I will say that I do prefer the ending of the film compared to the more like just tied up with a sweet little bow like we have here in this one. The ending is not supremely satisfying, and that's the very, very end. I mean, the reconnective aspect that happens with Danny and his father, that happens in both this and in the film, and so that's really satisfying. But yeah, this is an A for me. I definitely contend that Dr. Sleep is one that King did not try to do more of the same. He did something distinctively different I commend him for that. And yeah, this is one where he succeeded very much in the veering from what people were probably expecting, and just the viciousness of the villains and the fact that they tend to go after younger kids. It just really hits home so hard. And that's why the scene with Tremblay in the film that Flanagan did, that was like just perfectly like beat for beat what transpires in the book, is so disturbing. It's one of the more disturbing scenes that I've seen in a film in recent memory, was just them feasting on this child, and the fact that, you know, when they're suffering and in pain and bleeding and crying as they're trying to take the steam from them, it's even sweeter, it's a little more powerful. It's, you know, Truenaut are great villains, and just getting to reconnect with Danny Torrance and just the arc of his character, it's very compelling. And yes, this is an A. I love Dr. Sleep. It's a great book.
All right. Well, that is going to complete the ranking all the way through 2013.
Yeah.
So we have only one episode left. Now, I do have a question for you.
Yes.
How many more novels is he supposed to put out this year?
This year, nothing scheduled.
Nothing. No more.
Nothing.
If It Bleeds was the last.
It was.
Okay, and that was a collection, though.
Indeed it was, yeah.
Okay, so...
A collection of 4 novellas, you know, so not short stories. They're like little mini novels of sorts.
Okay, all right, because what I was thinking is it'd be great if he has one more coming, because we'll
Unless
record
he springs it upon us, man.
Well, we'll
which he
record the
could.
5th episode, and then I do want to put out all of them as one big thing, where
big
it's like
super episode?
complete ranking of all Stephen King novels, 1974 to 2020. But if there was one more coming in 2020, that would give us an excuse to put the episode out later and just tack on that extra book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He did a cool discussion a couple weeks ago during quarantine with John Grisham, where they basically interviewed each other.
Yeah.
It was really fun, and he hinted at 2 different books he's currently working on right now. One is just about finished, and the other one, he said, is pretty far off. But
I saw an article just now. I was looking to see if there was another book coming, and it said that he had to change something he's working on because of the coronavirus.
Yep, exactly. So he actually, and he talked about that during the Grisham interview. He said that he was originally going to set it, you know, in the year 2000 or 2000 in the year 2020, but he's actually decided to push when the book is set a year back because of how the world has pretty much changed so drastically, and we don't know when or if it's going to go back to that sort of normality. So yeah, he's actually setting the book in 2019 now instead. So that was just kind of out of necessity, I suppose. But yeah, unless he decides to surprise us with something, you know, I mean, we're only, as of this filming, we're 5 months into the year now. You know, so, and he's got time. He's sitting at home, man, you know.
Has he ever announced and put out a book within 6 months?
He did it with Elevation.
So,
you know,
I mean, maybe we'll be able to do that, but
yeah, you never know.
If not, we'll figure it out. But that's gonna do it for episode 4, right, of the novel tier ranking list. If you guys are enjoying these, please click the like button and subscribe to make sure you don't miss the final episode and all the other Stephen King tier rankings that we have planned. Again, we have quite a few plans, so it's going to be a lot of stuff.
Movies, television series, limited television series, like, you know, mini-series and event series and stuff like that.
And a separate tier ranking for the films that forgot the face of their father.
Yeah, there's some fun ones on there.
Well.
Pet Sematary 2, Return to Salem's Lot.
Sometimes they come back again or for more. Yeah, exactly. So we'll tackle those, but that's going to do it for this episode.
Yay.
All you, sir.
So, yes, thanks and grande gracias, everybody. I do have a separate little side channel if you just have any inclination to check out non-scarific stuff. It's in Fuegotainment, and I'm at
Link in the
Fuego,
description box.
Yep, and all social media sectors, just Jaime Fuego, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that jazz. But, yeah, peeps, until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, Cinemigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you for taking some time to check this out here, and I'm hopeful that we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And until then, remember,
Stay scared
and read Stephen King.